You'll be able to see and hear what your body is doing, but your existence will be as a passenger. You'll live in
the sunken place.
You and Michael are separated.
Yeah, of course we are. But I've been talking to him.
You're not safe for them anymore, are you? You told me yourself you'd become a danger.
Hello and welcome to Journey Through Sci-Fi, where we journey through the many subgenres of science fiction on screen. I'm Matt.
And I'm James, and in this series we're exploring the sci-fi subgenre of mad science. And in today's episode, we'll be looking at Get Out from 2017 and Possessor from 2020.
Yeah, more sci-fi horror here on the Mad Science series following our Tusk and Human Centipede episode last time. We got some more grim and violent tales of mad science.
Yeah, I feel like Grim and Violent would be the name of this double act of films, because Get Out's very grim and Possessor is very violent, as we will get into in today's discussion.
Do you not think that Possessor is grim?
I mean, Possessor is also grim, but I think it leans into the violence, as we will discuss.
Does.
It definitely gets a bit graphic in that one. But they're both films where we're seeing mad science being used to control people's minds. So it's all about identity and taking over somebody's body, all of that good sci-fi stuff in today's episode.
Yes, shall we start then with the modern horror classic Get Out from 2017?
Sounds like a plan.
Oh, no. 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 No, 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 no. I do something. That's not my experience. Not at all. The Armitages are so good to us. They treat us like family.
So this felt like kind of the start of a trend of big names in comedy getting into horror. I think Jordan Peele opened a bit of a door there that some other comedy people scrambled to get through to great success. Like thinking about Barbarian and Weapons by Zach Krieger from White Kids. Comedians getting into the horror scene. And Jordan Peele was a huge name in comedy prior to this, and is now not really a huge name in comedy, but an enormous name in horror.
Yeah, I guess also you could throw Kevin Smith into the mix with this as well, because like we talked about with Tusk, he went from doing more comedy cult films to some quite brutal horror with a tinge of comedy in there.
Yeah, I guess it's always been around, hasn't it? But I think Jordan Peele made it prestigious.
Yeah, because
you know what I mean?
Coming out of that double act, Key and Peele, and all of those skits, which I still get served on a regular basis on my algorithms on the various social media sites, I think he, like you say, he was like a big comedy name. And he's often talked about in interviews this kind of comparison between horror and comedy. You're trying to get something out of the audience in both instances. So in comedy, you want that laugh. And in horror, you want that scare. So you've got an end goal. And I think looking at it from that kind of viewpoint is a really interesting way of doing it, because you're trying to get something from the audience in both cases, but they're different kinds of emotions, but they're doing quite a visceral thing, would you say?
Yeah. It's a gut punch in different ways. That's what they're going for.
One's ha-ha and one's ah-ah.
Okay.
Maybe I shouldn't get into comedy. This is quickly becoming like a thing in the podcast. I make a terrible joke and it just does not land.
And I don't give you a generous laugh.
Well, I'll stay clear of my comedy profession and stand up for now. But yeah, Jordan Peele switched his career around, didn't he?
He absolutely did. Yeah, he's a very, very talented writer and director, I think. And it's like an incredible loss to comedy, but what a gain to horror that he's gone this way. And hopefully he'll go back and do some more comedy in his career. Hopefully reunite with Keegan-Michael Key at some point, make some more of that show. But yeah, an incredible move into horror. But there is actually quite a lot of just comedy in this film as well. There's satire throughout. Like the horror elements of this are satirical, which is a form of comedy, and then you also have major comic relief elements, which perhaps we'll talk more about as we go through the film. But what's your kind of recollection of when this film came out? Did you see this at cinemas? I was really late to this film.
I was late to this one as well. I remember it being, there was a lot of hubbub about it because it really struck a chord with people. And there was a real buzz, wasn't there, about this? But I think it was marketed primarily as this kind of, is it a horror? Is it a thriller? We don't quite know. And going into it, I think it kind of hides its sci-fi premise, doesn't it? You don't find out about that until later on. But I think it's one of those really interesting instances in science fiction where the sci-fi trope kind of just comes in at a very vital point, and then it all makes sense, because there's a great tradition of this, like Boys from Brazil. We covered that in our Mad Science series. Stepford Wives, all of these quite interesting social thrillers where something's a bit off, and that's kind of the horror element of it. And then later on, you have this kind of sci-fi explanation for what's going on.
Yeah, it sits in a very uncanny space for most of the film, and then it smuggles in a sci-fi premise which explains the uncanniness. Which, I don't know, as a sci-fi fan, I'm a little bit surprised that it was such a big hit with audiences, because I thought general audiences would maybe not like to have sci-fi smuggled into their horror movie, because it's I don't know, it's kind of a genre that obviously you and I love and sci-fi fans love, but is not wildly popular with general audiences. So you might not be happy about getting a sci-fi film if it's not what you went in for. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like Don't Worry, Darling. I think that's a really good instance of that, because that has like a sci-fi twist towards the end. And is that a kind of unexpected...
And you're there to watch Harry Styles.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone wants to see Florence Pugh and Harry Styles, and then, oh wait, there's something weird going on. Let's find out about that. But I think it feeds into this as like a sort of horror mystery as well. And I think there is still some sort of grounding in what's going on in this kind of mad science element of it. And like we looked at throughout the series, mad science has this DNA that it shares with these horror films, because horror came out of some of these early sci-fis that we were talking about, like Frankenstein, going back to that, and they're so interconnected. And looking at this film in 2017, we're seeing this interconnected nature of sci-fi and horror once again. And we've also got this kind of social thriller commentary on top of it, which really makes it very relevant to an audience of that time and today. Like, this film is still very, very poignant and still like incredibly relevant to now.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it's nearly 10 years old, does it? No. Partially because I think culture has sort of frozen a little bit for the last decade or so, but also it's very ahead of its time, or of its time, and then the time has stayed. Things have stayed the same, I think, culturally. Since some things have since 2017. That's why it can still speak to them. So how does this film kind of bring its sci-fi stuff to it? Because in my head, the sci-fi stuff comes at the end of the movie, but it's probably more like halfway through, because the second half is quite action-packed, so it kind of races past, doesn't it? But how does it bring that? How does it resolve that uncanniness into sci-fi?
Well, it's just like a slow burn, isn't it, the entire film? Because throughout it, you've got the character of Chris, played by Daniel Kaluuya, and his girlfriend Rose, played by Alison Williams. And the whole main idea is Rose brings her black boyfriend home to her white family in the suburbs, and there's this kind of racial paranoia, this tension that's throughout it, because you don't know how the family are going to react. Chris is very conscious of that, and it's kind of got this undercurrent of tension throughout it, and that kind of tension becomes more uncanny as it goes on. So it kind of just slowly eases you into that sci-fi premise by giving you this kind of strange mystery as to what's going on. And instantly when I watched it for the way back when, it did make me think, okay, there's some sort of mind control, there's something going on. I don't quite know what it is, but you do get that sense, and it feels like it's got this kind of sci-fi lineage of these kind of films where there is some sort of body snatching going on. And it's all it doesn't really explain itself until the end. And even when it does explain itself, Jordan Peele doesn't give us a overly elaborate exposition of the actual technology, which I think is a good thing because it's still got questions around it, and it's more sort of like just taken as, okay, so this is what's happening here.
Yeah, specifically it's explained through like an orientation video, which taps into that kind of a certain old-fashioned aesthetic that is fitting for the context of the kind of racial tension at the heart of what the procedure entails and what this Armitage family has been up to. But it also continues the uncanniness of it, doesn't it? Because he's got like a live feed to it's called Jim, I think, the guy that wants to take his body. He's got a live feed, but it's through an old cathode ray kind of, BioShock television set, 1950s set. So it's this mixtures of technologies that he's interacting with while strapped down in a terrifying kind of hunting lodge setting.
And because that's also stylized as well, you kind of can't quite work out if it's real or not. And I think the film does that a lot. There's this blurring of reality that's happening.
Yes, as soon as he goes to the sunken place for the first time, there's a sort of looming possibility of things happening that are in his mind or under hypnotic suggestion, including his whole experience in the weird basement, which I do think is all supposed to be real and as presented, but it has the potential to be that, doesn't it? So you get this uncanny, weird explanation of what's going on, which is just through an orientation video, not a scientific explanation. Just it's a sort of product created for to ease the victim into the process, I guess. And then we see that what is the kind of mad science of it? It's quite vague, isn't it? It looks like a brain transplant, but I don't think that is, given what we know about what happens to the victims and the perpetrators, I don't think it's a straight brain swap as we might have seen in other mad science movies. But that's the kind of visual aesthetic in terms of mad science that they go for at the end of the film, isn't it?
Yeah, well, they call it the coagula procedure, don't they?
Yeah.
And coagula apparently references the alchemical phrase solve et coagula, which means to dissolve and recombine. So in the actual experiment itself, or the operation that is happening, the idea of the coagula procedure is that you slice a part of the brain and then you can implant someone else's brain in there, but you have to keep some element of the initial body's brain there. And there's something to do with the hypnosis that Missy is doing to Chris's character that means that his consciousness had, like, the idea of the sunken place is the consciousness is still there, but it's kind of like compartmentalized a little bit, so that there's that terrifying idea that the people which have had this operation done to them, there's still a part of them in their body, there's still a part of them in their brain, but then there's a bigger part of someone else's brain that has been put in there, so it's that person's consciousness who is in control. And all of this is kind of said in a very concise manner. But that idea kind of, like you say, it's not just a straight up, this person's brain and this person's brain. It's a little bit of this brain, a little bit of that brain. Makes it more terrifying, I think, because that person is still in their body. Yeah. But they're not in control.
And that's all somewhat vague, but obviously in storytelling terms, by that point in the film, you already understand all of that. It's just kind of unlocking a bit of explanation of how, but you don't actually need to know the detail of how. You just need it confirmed that it is what's happening, because obviously Chris's fear and paranoia and his interactions with the other people at the Armitage house and during that party/auction scene really... You get a good sense of what's going on. It's just having the characters kind of admit it to Chris while he's being prepped to become their next victim. It's really interesting you said that the coagula, it's linked to, that's like wording from alchemy. That's really interesting because I think there's a specific kind of sub branch of mad science at work here. The combination of like clean clinical brain surgery with hypnotic suggestion, we're starting to bring like quack science into the mix, right? It's not just mad, there's some quackery and the kind of hypnosis being a key element of it. So I really like that there's also alchemy just like thrown in the mix in the kind of milieu of all of the science that they're doing. They've got some sort of historical connection to alchemy, which is also sort of, no, I was going to say sort of quackery, but it is quackery, isn't it? It's not real. So it's bigging up the madness of the mad science and adding a layer of quackery, I think, as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that as well, that idea of the quackery, as you say, because they are still respectable doctors and neuroscientists in their community of white privileged people. So that's kind of like at odds with that as well, because they are part of this community. They're well respected. One of them is a neurosurgeon. The other one is a psychiatrist. They have come together to create this procedure, but then the historical lineage as well goes back to their grandfather, who has this idea to put white people in black bodies.
Yeah, guy who learned exactly the wrong lesson from the 1936 Olympics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And yeah, so all of that's kind of leading back into it, which is scary, isn't it? But it's got this eerie undertone to it that they're, because like you say, the auction as well, it's very much an auction, and all of these white, well-to-do people are just talking to Chris, and you can see them sizing him up. Really awkward racial stereotyping that's going on during that scene.
Yeah, probably the most uncomfortable scene of the movie. It's really where, like, you there's this continuing loss of control for Chris, where his justified paranoia sort of, it's not paranoia if they're really out to get you kind of thing. There's the sliding from one end of that scale to the other, but also like completely losing control of the situation. Like, paranoia might be his friend early on because it's kind of his gut instinct kicking in and giving him a warning signal, but by the time of the party, he's descending into the horror of the movie, and it is the party where he is told to get out, the titular get out. But I think way before that is said to him, it's impossible for him to get out. But it's that transitory point in the middle of the film where you're realizing that he can't get out, that he should get out, but he can't. Chris is realizing that, and it all coagulates into this feeling of terror and wanting to get out. And then it's just like brilliant storytelling and filmmaking, isn't it? Because it allows that propelling the story into an action-packed climax of terror and violence and burning down the house, which is very cathartic and satisfying.
Yeah, it's what you want to see by the end of the film, isn't it? You want to see Chris get away. You want to see him get out from the Armitage house. But before that, there's all this kind of, again, going back to the slow burn of it and the sort of uncanny nature of everything that's going on. All of the stuff with Georgina and Walter, the way that they react to Chris and their speech patterns and vocabulary, just the way they are talking, it doesn't seem like it's coming from them, because it seems very forced and it seems very different. And the words they're using, they sound like old white grandparents from this community. And it's
when Georgina has to translate "rat you out" to Tattletale, and the look on her face of just like kind of keeping calm but searching for the word and just like not understanding a young black man's way of speaking, basically, and then clicking into Tattletale. There's something really chilling about that. Just the distance it creates between them, and the way that Chris is just sort of like trying to read her and trying to relate to her in a way that he obviously feels like he should be able to, and it's just not there, the thing that he's reaching for. And is that the same scene where she has that kind of first break where presumably the real Georgina, I don't know the names, I don't know if Georgina is the grandma's name or the victim's name, but that's the first moment where that mask starts to slip and that single teardrop. Oh my God, that's a horrifying moment.
Yeah, it's all those moments where the mask slips. I think they really grab you, because you get that same moment that you're referring to, the titular Get Out bit, where Lakeith Stanfield, who's playing Andre/Logan King, has that moment where the flash goes off. And the idea of the flash sort of interrupting the hypnosis, there's something in the brain which snaps back into life so the other person's in control for a split second.
Yeah.
And just the way he's talking as well, and just even his movements, he moves like an old man, doesn't he? He's kind of a little bit sort of slower and just a bit more upright, and like I say upright, he looks like slightly hunched at points as well. I don't know if that was just me putting that onto his character, but I think it's something in the way Lakeith Stanfield's moving as well.
Yeah, no, all of them, all of the people who have been victims of the coagular process, the actors do an incredible job of portraying someone who looks like they're wearing someone else's skin. It's amazing. It's not just the writing's very good, the use of language and all of that, and Peele really calls attention to it in the scene between Chris and Georgina, but their physicality is amazing. They don't look uncomfortable in their own skin, but they look awkward in their bodies and out of place. And that is perfect, uncanny horror before the reveal. Because something's wrong with all of these people, and Chris knows it, and Chris is scared of it. But that is the nature of the uncanny. You can't quite place your finger on exactly what is scary about it. It's just off. It's not right. It's unnatural. That's what he recognizes in it, and the audience does too. And it's what makes the build up so scary. But
the thing is, you could strip out that sci-fi idea of this, and it would still work. All of this, like racial tension and the stereotyping that's going on, and the feeling of unease. You're worried for Chris because it just has that very sort of, like you said, the sort of gut punch feeling. You're like, oh, I feel a bit sick about how they're interacting with him and what's going to happen, and all the little things. Like Jordan Peele's gone on record saying that all of these little everyday microaggressions and social dynamics that he's experienced as a black man, and he's fed that into the script, and you really feel that kind of it kind of goes into the social powerlessness later on, in the kind of the fact that it kind of mirrors what's happening to Chris. He is powerless to what's going on, and I think there's lots of there are lots of things that I can't properly comment on as a white guy, but you can see all the ways that Jordan Peele is feeding that back into this film.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's clearly very personal, and I wonder, is this film less scary then as a white person, or do you feel that you're being told that kind of a story from a black perspective in a way that makes it as frightening? Maybe particularly being British white people as well, not having that kind of black American experience, which is probably what the film is more directly rooted in. Are you less scared, I guess, because of that?
I think you do feel that sense of being scared throughout it, but because you are scared for Chris, and any normal human being can feel that empathy towards him and his situation in this film. And I think that's where it comes from. But obviously there must be a whole nother experience of this if you're able to relate to some of the things that are happening, because these aren't things which we might experience, but they are things that people experience in life.
You're saying you feel scared for Chris, but maybe you don't feel as scared as Chris. Maybe.
Exactly, yeah.
You said something really interesting about the sci-fi just then. You said you could strip out all of the sci-fi of it. Certainly, the first time I saw it, I wasn't expecting it to be a sci-fi movie. I thought some sort of, fantastical, mystical thing, satanic ritual, something like that. More of the hypnosis stuff, which I don't. I'm really slagging off hypnosis. I think it does. It can work and it can be effective. Smokers have had success with hypnotic suggestion, but it's on the border, let's say, of quackery, in my opinion, in my humble opinion. But I was kind of expecting more down that route when I first saw it. And I think that's why I said that audiences might have been uncomfortable. Because for me as a sci-fi fan, I was like, it was a very exciting twist to be like, oh, it's a sci-fi movie. This is cool. But the film, like you said, I think the film would work in exactly the same way if there was no sci-fi element here. It just makes it more of a fun genre movie for those of us that like that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. But I think all good sci-fi is making some sort of social commentary. And I think using it in this way is a really good way to get this to a large group of people, because having it in the genre aspect, like horror and sci-fi, just makes it more accessible to people as well, I think.
And we'll talk about this, I think, a bit more when we talk about Possessor, but there's something about the wealthy class, wealthy white people in this film weaponizing technology and having access to technology that is on the level of magic in terms of the real world applications, that they have access to this wonderful technology and they use it in this racist, oppressive, horrifying way. I think we see that again in terms of more a commentary on capitalism in Possessor that we'll talk about. But it's that idea of having access to and then immediately weaponizing an incredible piece of technology that's been developed and released that you couldn't do if this film was just going down the mystical, supernatural route. Because I don't think there's anything particularly interesting about a white family having privileged access to, I don't know, like a witchcraft spell that allows them to take over someone's body, but having access to all of the academic structures that have led to one of them becoming a brilliant neurosurgeon and the other one being a psychiatrist, all of that stuff, that works well as a commentary on racial white privilege and stuff.
Yeah, and then they're using this new invention that they've made not in the kind of...
Not in an altruistic way to benefit humanity, just to benefit them and their rich old white friends.
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. They're just using it to prolong these rich white friends' lives, and also
at the
to
horrifying
get rich.
expense of young black people's lives.
Yeah, and also they've got they've done this so many times. They're well rehearsed, and that makes it more terrifying because nobody looks at them as well. And there's all these little subtle things that Jordan Peele weaves in throughout, like the interaction with the police officer that they have, and the fact that Rose is so adamant that Chris not show his license to this police officer, which like on first viewing, it's like, oh, she's just defending her boyfriend. She thinks that the police officer is doing this because he's racially stereotyping him. But if you look at it again, it's because Rose doesn't want the police officer to know that this is Chris, and Chris has been spotted in this area.
Right, I'd never clocked that. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Like little things like that they're doing throughout. And there's a line that Rose says, like I've got to pry it out of your dad or something to the dog. She said something like that. And then obviously her family wants to pry out Chris from his body. There's loads of little subtle things that Jordan Peele's doing. There's also the fact that everybody in this auction party is wearing red, which is associated with Republicans. And then Chris and Andre Logan are the only people wearing blue.
Are they?
Which is more Democrat. I don't know how true that one is, but I was watching it. I was like, oh, okay, I can kind of see that. There's little subtle things that he's throwing in here. I think they can take multiple readings, but I think it just says so much about the craft of this film and all the little layers.
Yeah. You also just said something really interesting that made me think about this. The family has been doing this for such a long time, and they have been. They've really like perfected the coagular procedure, but they haven't been doing it so long that we see any second generation transplants, right? Because presumably the intention for coagular is for everybody at that auction to over time transfer their consciousness to a younger body and then go on and live on longer and then do it again, right? Because their new body will age and ultimately they'll want to do it again. How do you think this film would play if Chris was interacting with like an entirely second generation group of people who have already all transferred their consciousnesses. Does it still work if the party is all black people who are behaving like Walter, Georgina, Andre? And he's still having that uncanny interaction with them, but everybody is like that. Or does it not work? And is that, is there a world? I don't think you can make a sequel to this because of the ending, because of how it ends. But a potential sequel where we're seeing the next generation of it and how those interactions play out.
I guess it could work, but I think it takes away. I think because of the social commentary of it, I think it would take away from the reading of the film, because I feel like you need to see those white characters behaving the way they do in order to really sort of get the meaning of it and like really take a look in the mirror when you're watching this. And I think that's so integral to the film. If you sort of saw that through some sort of flashback or something and just went back to what these people looked like before they had their consciousness transferred, it would lose some of that punch that it's got at the moment.
I think there's an interesting sequel that could be carved out of that, but I don't know if a sequel is an appropriate thing for a movie like this.
But it's also got that cult aspect to it, though, doesn't it? Like the idea of like if it was a scene more like that becomes even more culty than it is at the moment, because there is this kind of cult nature around this auction and what these people are doing. They're all part of, I forget, they call it some sort of name, don't they? They're like, I think they say it in the video, like they've got a name for the organization or something. I think they just call them like the Order of the Coagula or something like that. And the fact they're an order makes it, again, it's got that cult nature to it.
Yeah, the order of.
Yeah. So like you become one of our family of people, of like white people that have had their brains put into black bodies. But it's still got all that DNA with these other mad science stories we've looked at throughout the season, like the ideas that we've seen, like in Frankenstein, when you've got like body modification and all that kind of stuff, and the idea of using the brain and putting a brain in a different body. That's come directly out of Frankenstein. It's got certain elements of like the Stepford Wives from 1975, all of that kind of stuff. But I think it's giving it a very different modernizing, and there's a new way of telling the story for a modern audience.
I think it even like it kind of it's knocking on the door of cyberpunk in the sense that you can transfer the separation of the consciousness of the physical body and those two things as being separable and movable entities that can shift around. But I guess I wouldn't consider this a cyberpunk film because there's so much of the mysticism as well that it's all wrapped up in, and the fact that techie side comes right at the end and isn't foregrounded. But I guess on that point, that it has similarities to our next film. And I wonder if we should move on and talk about Possessor, which I think is more openly and forwardly a cyberpunk movie.
Yeah, let's talk about Possessor.
Hi listeners, hope you're enjoying the show. If you want to support us and get access to hundreds of hours of bonus episodes, you can sign up to our Patreon.
We've got discussions on all the latest sci-fi films in cinemas, the Bad Movie Bunker, and Patrons' Picks, as well as mini-series covering your favourite franchises.
Patrons get to have their say on what we cover, both over on Patreon and right here on the main show too.
So if you want to join, head over to patreon.com/Journey Through Sci-Fi.
Now, back to the episode.
Well, imagine Colin Tate as the unstable lover who feels diminished by his new family. Ultimately, he breaks, killing John, kills Ava, kills himself. With Ava out of the picture, Reed inherits everything. Becomes CEO, cry for the cameras, clean tragedy, no one answered questions. Pay is significant. Money and shares. So when do I stop?
So a much less fun film than Get Out.
Oh, it was real brutal watching this again.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten because we covered this on Patreon a while ago, and looking at it now for the Mad Science series with this kind of mad science lens, I had a very different experience with it. I think, yeah, and it's got all of those that sort of the cyberpunk nature of it, I think, really comes out, that you were saying just a minute ago. And it's just like, it is very unsettling, isn't it?
Yeah, I when we covered this when it came out, I probably said something to the effect of, I really liked it and I never want to watch it again. Because I just don't know how I feel about it. I think it's an incredible film, but I couldn't possibly say it's an enjoyable film. I just find it deeply, deeply unpleasant, cynical, miserable, grim, but also just incredibly powerful and affecting, and I think succeeds in everything its director is trying to do. Like, it's incredibly compelling, difficult to watch, and maybe a perfect horror film in that regard. Because actually, I think one thing I didn't say when we were talking about Get Out, and it's interesting comparing it to Possessor, I really don't like Rod in Get Out. I don't need all that
Comedy,
straight up comedy, because it's a really good satire, and Jordan Peele uses the beats of comedy in his horror as he's discussed in interviews. So I think it almost sort of undermines the use of comedy structure in horror to have like a very straightforward comic relief character, and I think it's worse because Rod's scenes go on for ages when he's on screen. Like, he just talks and talks and talks. And it undercuts the horror. But then contrasting it to Possessor, I sort of missed Rod, because I was like, God, I could use a laugh in this movie. Like, it's so bleak.
Well, apparently Peele originally wrote a much darker ending to Get Out as well, where Chris was arrested after the murders at the end of that. And that would have probably put it more in line with Possessor, because, I mean, Possessor, right from the offset, it starts with this brutal killing, this assassination just out of nowhere. Yeah. And that kind of sets the tone for what you're going to see throughout the film. Yeah.
Brutal being the operative word. It's not just any assassination. It's an incredibly graphically violent assassination. It's also in-universe, unnecessarily violent. So the setup is she's an assassin, a corporate assassin who, I don't know, let's say really loves her job. And in the first scene that establishes how this body mind transfer corporate assassination technology works, she chooses to kill her target with a knife. Is it a knife, or she's using something?
Yeah, it's a knife, isn't it?
Stabbing.
Yeah.
And then it's immediately revealed that she has a gun in her purse. And she stabs him like 40 times, and it goes on forever, and there's a ton of fake blood, and it's extremely grisly, and we have like a detailed extreme close-up of the knife going into the neck, all of that. And even in universe, that is called out by another character as being a weird thing for her to do, because she was supposed to go in there and shoot him, and more of a clean kill. So yeah, brutal, definitely the operative word in this opening scene, and the whole movie, really.
But she claims that's to be more in character, isn't it? That's her go-to line. She's like, "Oh, this is more in character for the person that I am possessing."
She has no idea what the character is of anybody, herself or any of the people that she's possessed. She is all over the place.
See,
and a good liar.
This is interesting because I've seen other people read this film, and they've suggested that maybe that is like the other personality bleeding through in some way. So the idea...
Which other personality? So the person she was possessing?
Yeah, so like Tassia's invading someone who is a waitress, and there's like a part of the waitress who potentially would want to murder one of these rich guys she is waiting for. And then later on, when Tassia invades Colin, the idea that Colin would want to brutally murder his father-in-law is part of Colin's thing. But I don't know, because Tassia is kind of the whole thing is about the identity of Tassia, and whether that identity is lost by this possession, this invading other people's bodies. And that is her like identity kind of like gets eroded in places and changes and merges with these other people. So it's unclear as to how much of that is her and how much of that is the other person. But you're right, it does seem sort of like she's an assassin, but she's becoming incredibly more brutal in her actions, and that feels like it's coming from her. But there could be some sort of like residual stuff from the character.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, the film is definitely asking that question of who's in control and when, and the bleed through of identity. Is it, and even is the identity binary, Tassia or her host, or is there a third blurred identity? It's definitely asking all of those questions. But in any case, Tassia is lying to Gerda when she says, I thought it was more in character, because she either did it because she loves stabbing people, or she did it because she wasn't fully in control, and that was the host bleeding through, or it was this third identity that's a mixture of both. But that is not what she's saying to Gerda. She's saying that was a controlled choice on my part for the purposes of the deception of my job, which is that bit is I think she's definitely lying there. But whether she knows the correct answer or not is an open question by the end of the film.
Yeah, it's just that whole idea about the identities as well. It made me think about Ghost in the Shell and that the merging of identities you get in that film, and this sort of which one is the real Major Kusanagi in that one, and which one is the bad guy, the puppet master, and that merging that they have towards the end of that film. But in this, it's got that kind of cyberpunk DNA, hasn't it? Like you get in Ghost in the Shell. And the technology itself is kind of, they look like little plague masks, don't they? When they're transferring their consciousness.
Really reminded me of Psycho Mantis from Metal Gear Solid, which is a sort of he's got a gas mask, I think, hasn't he? But yeah, plague masks, or kind of is it called a proboscis? The kind of the long snout on some little insects. The way the tube kind of goes away from the face in the mask. Yeah, however you want to phrase it, it's got that creepy looking HR Giga kind of biomechanical nature to it. It evokes biological things, but with a sleek mechanical texture and structure.
Do you feel like this is a widely known about technology, or is it just the technology that this one company is using?
Yeah,
for nefarious
such a good question. It can't be widely known about, because you can't do this corporate espionage assassination work if it's public knowledge that you could possess someone's body. In fact, like the nature of crime and murder as we know it would come apart at the seams if there was any kind of reasonable doubt in a jury's mind that a person could have been possessed. You'd really lose all law and order and all sense of justice in that kind of a world. So yeah, like looking back to Get Out, this feels like proprietary technology, and this megacorp company that I don't think we even learn the name of is using it to just make money through murder.
Yeah.
They're selling corporate assassinations through this incredible piece of technology.
The technology, again, kind of doesn't have this sort of idealistic goal that some of these technologies that these mad scientists create usually has. There's usually some sort of grandiose vision for what's going on. And I mean, even Get Out, they've kind of got this vision of, hey, we're going to extend all of our like friends' lives by doing this, and we're going to give them new bodies and all this kind of stuff. But in this, it seems purely for profit and control.
I think in both films, there's no altruistic outcome, because the technologies are inherently in need of a victim. Certainly in Get Out, you have scientists who perfected consciousness transfer, but they have nowhere to put the host consciousness. So you can't get a fully consensual swap, and it seems very unlikely that anyone would consent to the sunken place methodology. And likewise, why would anyone consent to what's going on in Possessor? Maybe there's consensual applications to this, but a choice has been made early on that we're going to kidnap people, possess them, murder people using their bodies, and then make them kill themselves. that they've gone straight down that route to increase their own influence in industry.
And the thing is, the technology works, doesn't it? Like it's effective, it works. The same as in Get Out. They're not experimenting, trying to get to that point. It's already established.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. In both films, the technology has worked, but we are watching the story of its undoing. So, there's a lot of hubris in Get Out, right? They've been doing it for long enough, it works well enough, but they've got cocky. There's hubris there. They think that they can dominate people's spirits, and Chris proves them wrong. And then, it seems to have been working quite successfully, but the way we're shown possession in Possessor is nightmarish. It's a horrible experience for Tasia. And she seems like she's quite a horrible person, but like it's extremely damaging to her psyche. Maybe it's been very successful for Gerda, although she's a monster as well.
Yeah.
It works if you're a monster completely detached from empathy. Then it's a really successful piece of technology.
And that is, so Gerda's the boss of this company and she's Tasia's boss, and her end goal seems to be to create someone who is devoid of empathy, to be like the perfect assassin, who Tasia kind of almost was. And that's her end goal in this film. But it's that kind of identity stuff that we're going into. And she's trying to, I think Brandon Cronenberg said this before, it's about manufacturing identity in real life. And how some people do that on sort of like social media things. They kind of create an identity around themselves, like influencers, things like that. And I think everybody kind of creates their own kind of identity about themselves, what they think they are. And this idea that Tasia's identity is being sort of molded into this assassin from what she's doing, and she's constantly having to mold her identity into other people so that she can realistically perform as that person. So she's losing track of who she is, but then Gerda's got an idea of what she wants Tasia to be by the end of it. She wants her to be this perfect assassin. So this idea of like molding yourself, I think, is quite an interesting one that the film's delving into.
Yeah, and having to mold herself to herself. That's a great scene, isn't it? Early in the film, where she's rehearsing how she might behave as herself before she has to behave as herself to just to spend time with her family. She has to rehearse her own possible lines. So she's pretty broken, right, at the start of the film, and I think the question then is how much is she broken by her interaction with this cyberpunk technology, and how much is Tasia sort of a broken individual unto herself. I don't know if we can definitively say with just what we're presented in the film, because of when we join her in her journey, but doubtless she's broken. I think what we can definitively say is Gerda is pushing on that breaking point. So whether she caused it in the first place or not is irrelevant. She's certainly happy to continue to press those buttons. That scene where she's scoring her reintegration on like a score sheet is so bleak, and I love that it comes back to that at the end of the film, and Gerda sort of wins, I guess, in the end.
Because it changes, doesn't it, her answer about the butterfly. So she's guilty and she's still got some sort of like compassion, some empathy there in those first memory tests.
Yeah.
But then by the end, that's gone. And she has become what Gerda wanted her to be the whole time.
She no longer feels the guilt she felt as a child. And I think she doesn't even acknowledge feeling guilt as a child. She's like, the empathy has just been completely drained out of her. And it's all done like a sort of corporate performance review sort of meeting, isn't it? Like, that's what it feels like, which is just great stuff, but very depressing. Yeah,
great little performance review, that. Imagine if you had to do that, some sort of weird psychological test at work. That'd be a bit much.
It also really reminded me of the Voight-Kampff test, because it's this kind of poking at empathy. Like, how do you respond to this situation where your empathy might be relevant? And we're just going to write some stuff down on this piece of paper and you don't need to worry about it. But it's incredibly important and we might shoot you at the end of it.
And as the film goes on, I think the real turning point for Tasia is when she's possessing Colin, and she's playing this new role, and it's a big money earner for the company. It's going to be really big. But when she's impersonating Colin, she finds herself drifting. And there's this idea of, I think Gerda says it I think during that memory scene where she's trying to sort of analyze how Tassia's doing. She says it takes a small thought to lose control, one little fracture. And then we see that visually, I think, as well. Like there's little small grains that Colin thinks he sees, and I think Tassia thinks she sees.
Yeah. The spinning bit of cotton or something.
Yeah, so it's like almost that moment is the small thought that Tassia's having from Colin, and that's the beginning of that kind of fracture. These two people fighting for control of that one body. And that's when things get really interesting in this kind of how much consciousness can be erased by possessing these people and how much is it going to fight back.
Yeah. We get into the parts of the film that are genuinely enjoyable to watch, which is where it becomes a two-hander between Christopher Abbott and Andrea Riseborough. So I don't know about you, but you come away from this film thinking of Andrea Riseborough as the main character because Tassia Voss is the main character. But obviously, most of the film, Tassia Voss is played by Christopher Abbott, who also plays Colin Tate. And I've said this many times on the podcast, but it's one of my favourite things in a film is when an actor does a good job of playing two characters in the same film. And Christopher Abbott really steals the show in that kind of middle to end part of the movie when it's all in Colin's body and Tassia and Colin are wrestling for control. And within that, it does allow it to be a proper two-hander. You know, it's a two-hander in the sense that they're sharing the role and they have roughly equal scenes, I think. But then even more, you get the kind of the stuff that's happening just inside Colin's head, one of their heads, their shared head, where they're actually on screen together and interacting and have that tension, but they're kind of the same person as well. They're wearing the same outfit. I loved all that stuff. What did you think of this interaction between these two separate characters, but not entirely separate people?
I think I quite like the way that they're kind of drawing comparisons between each other the whole time, because there's this kind of, they're both carrying a kind of guilt as well, it feels like. Like Colin is having an affair, which I think that his girlfriend knows about and is fine with. But he's also,
you reckon? Yeah.
He's also kind of being a bit submissive in the fact that he is doing this terrible job for Sean Bean's character, his girlfriend's dad. And he's just like slogging away doing that in a similar way to how Tassia is doing this terrible job slogging away for her boss. But so it's kind of got comparisons there into what they're doing and just like, but then I think Tassia actually really enjoys her job, whereas Colin is just kind of doing it for the sake of his girlfriend and the money that might sort of put on him through her dad and this big sort of empire that he's got. So there's all those kind of elements at play of each other, and how Tassia is taking over that identity. She begins by being in control. She peels the apple like she normally does, and she is still in control. And then there are bits where Colin is kind of feeding his way back in, and that kind of comes to a breaking point where Tassia loses complete control and then Colin takes over again. And that comes down to when she's trying to kill herself and then end the job, right? And there's something about that moment where she has to kill herself that she can't quite do. And I couldn't quite figure out the exact reasoning behind that. Did you have something in your head about why she can't do that?
No, I think it comes down to that central question of the film, which is who's in control when. And the question there is, does she fail because Tassia doesn't want to shoot herself or feel like she is shooting herself in the head? Or does she fail because Colin is resisting the whole time and the moment of shooting himself in the head is enough that resistance like comes to the top, and again, it also calls back to the first scene as well, because it happens in the first scene. So is it a consistent problem with Tassia's performance as a corporate assassin that she can't do it, or is it faulty technology, you know. We never see any confirmation of other assassins doing it. Gerda seems to be like a more successful person. She's got a similar job, but she's more senior to Tassia.
Yeah.
But she does, and we do see her possess someone, but she doesn't have to do the gun to the head thing because that's taken care of externally in her case. But we don't get confirmation of how easy it is to do that bit of the job. So I think it's impossible to answer the question: is Tassia bad at her job, or is there faulty tech?
Well, either way, she isn't able to complete her mission, and Colin takes over. And throughout, we've seen this really great. This Brandon Cronenberg does some amazing scenes of these kind of two characters blurring into each other. Like the visuals of that are really good.
I love that stuff.
Like there's the sex scene where she's sort of imagining herself as Colin, and Colin's there, and it's kind of this flip-flop, and that is in comparison to her scene with her husband previously, and this kind of, she can't quite figure out where she is in this scenario because she's been like both sides gender-wise, and all of this stuff. And then I think the moment which always grabs me is the cover photo for the actual film. This shot of Colin putting on Tassia's face, and then finding out who Tassia is and having that kind of blurring of consciousness again, where he suddenly knows about her. He doesn't know exactly what's happened. He can't make full sense of it. But then he goes after Tassia's family because he knows that she should be somewhere. She's the one who's done this, but he can't find her because he doesn't realize that she's in his head.
Yeah, it's an incredible sequence of literalizing. Is that a word? Can I use that? Making literal the experience of remembering her memories, it kind of in real time, discovering Tassia as a person, as a consciousness within his own mind, and then expressed through putting on a mask of her face, trying to kill her, squishing her head, but turning it into this rubbery Andrea Riseborough, sort of gross version of Andrea Riseborough's face, and wearing it, and then sort of trotting through her memories that exist within him. It's a brilliant expression of that. I mean, I love the fact that it's a physical mask of her that he puts on, because it has to feel like he is literally stepping into her memories, but in a gross, uncanny way, because it couldn't just be Andrea Riseborough walking through that and, you know, we understand that it's Colin experiencing it. It needs to be that one step of removal from that so that it feels unpleasant and horrific, as the whole film should and does.
And there is something about having those scenes play out in this kind of gross body horror as well that is obviously reminiscent of David Cronenberg and like Brandon's dad and all the stuff that he's done previously. So this film could have just been a bit more, it could have gone down the sort of more symbolic route, but everything seems very visceral and tangible. Just these scenes where the body is morphing and they've got all of this sort of like clever production effects and masks being used for this sort of surreal possession stuff. So it kind of takes it away from the kind of digital possession that you might expect with the technology to something that becomes a bit more physical.
Yeah, a more traditional take on a cyberpunk movie would be, well, like The Matrix, right? Like, you know, they're sort of going into the digital world using kind of CGI special effects. This is a much more, this is more like how David Cronenberg would do it. You can see that influence from his dad. It's stickier and messier and physical. Speaking of, what is it? Solve et coagula? Is that the phrase from Alchemy? The dissolve and recombine. That is what it feels like when she first goes into Colin. You get that sequence of the kind of waxy plastic versions of both of their bodies disintegrating and reintegrating as her mind goes into Colin's body. That done through that kind of, I think it's physical effects. It looks very physical, and it's certainly not the kind of the Matrix interpretation of stepping into the digital self.
And it's also that kind of next step from digital surveillance, I guess, isn't it? Because it's gone from just Colin's job of going into people's laptop feeds and seeing what their blinds look like and that kind of surveillance, to the surveillance of, I'm going to surveil your life by being you for a bit. So it's kind of got that element to it as well.
Yeah. Colin's job is insane. The company of Zuther is insane. Like, we're told at the start they're a data mining company. And then in practice, what that is he's just looking through laptop webcams, presumably without the consent of the owner. I don't know, actually. And he's literally just like logging the type of curtains that they have, even if there's a couple like having sex, like, and he gets she gets distracted by that. But his actual job is just to log the kind of curtain they have in that room. It's such a boring, bleak cyberpunk dystopia job, and brilliant, like pre-AI, because that job does. I assume that's not how data mining. I hope that's not how data mining ever worked, but it just wouldn't work that way now, and you wouldn't even conceive of it because you would use an AI to do that. But using just a bank of humans called miners to do this unbelievably mundane job of just listing what they see on a screen all day.
Well, it's like I heard this rumor about, the Amazon stores where you go in and you can just leave with the stuff that you picked up.
Oh my God, I've heard this. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was no special tech involved. They were literally just watching you the entire time and like adding a cabbage to your Amazon account if you walk out with a cabbage.
Which is mad. So that's kind of like, it's a similar kind of surveillance
yeah.
if that's how those shops work. But yeah, so there's probably a few Collins doing that in these Amazon shops if that's how it's going down.
Yeah. What a job. What a career.
Terrifying. But it's all this kind of routine of the business of it all as well, because everything's very formulaic in what they're doing. The corporation that Tassia is working for are just doing this for the purpose of money. And their end goal is actually to fuck everyone over and then take control of that company that Sean Bean owns. So it's all just coming down to that and the sort of manipulation of everyone involved. And again, you've got mad science being owned by the corporations. The corporations want this technology to earn more money. And then when they do, terrible shit happens.
Yeah. Absolute cyberpunk dystopia movie.
But it doesn't get overthrown, does it? At the end of it, the corporation wins and they get exactly what they want. They get control of Tassia. And then Tassia basically murders her entire family, or as Colin. But then there's that switch, because it's almost like Tassia wants that to happen because she wants to lose those connections that are keeping her tied up and keeping her feeling guilty and empathetic. So
and again, that sort of open question of, is that just because it, like, is Tassia, a dead-eyed psycho in her heart of hearts, or has she become this way because of a kind of erosion of empathy through interacting with this horrific technology that is her job? I don't know. Or did she choose to interact with horrific technology because in her heart of hearts she's a dead-eyed psycho? I don't know if we can answer that, but that's where we get to at the end of the film. And it's just so depressing because it's like, I don't know, what's the point of this job? Like, what do you want out of life if you're willing to murder your whole family so you can just do more murdering at work? Like, geez, where's the work-life balance?
Yeah, absolutely bleak. So in Possessor, we've got this technology being used to kind of weaponize people's identities and take people over and then control them and get more money for the company. And then Get Out, we've got a similar kind of thing where science is being used by these upper class white elites to appropriate bodies and extend their privilege further. So in both senses, you've got this overruling class company doing it for profit.
Very bleak, very bleak. This is mad science in the hands of just heartless corporate entities, I guess. It's a kind of a cult group in Get Out, but they operate like a little business, don't they? Just self-sustaining and selling their wares. So yeah, both got that kind of feeling to them.
But yeah, it's interesting seeing how mad science has taken a turn.
And it's interesting that they're two of the most recent films that we've talked about in the series. So we kind of got to this late stage capitalism element of mad science. But with that, I wonder if it's a good time to talk about kind of coming to the end of this series, because we are approaching the end of our Mad Science series, and next time we're going to be returning to its roots and looking once again at the ultimate mad science tale of Frankenstein. What are we doing next time, James?
So next time on the show, we'll be looking at Del Toro's take on Frankenstein from 2025. And then we're also going to be taking a look at a relatively new release from Maggie Gyllenhaal, The Bride, and her take on the Frankenstein story.
So we've seen the late stage capitalism take on mad science. Let's see how the mad science genre is returning to its roots in 2025, 2026, at the time of recording, now, the present day. So we'll be looking at that next time.
Yes, and remember, if you want to hear more episodes and know when that new episode is coming out, make sure you're subscribed so you get that in your feed as soon as it's there.
Please follow us on social media. Just search for Journey Through Sci-Fi on your social media platform of choice. I'm sure you'll find us, or you can visit our website for more information about us, about the show.
And remember, if you want a free and easy way to support the podcast, why not leave us a review? It's a quick and easy way to help new listeners discover the show. If you can leave 5 stars and a little comment on why you like the show, that really does us a world of good. So please do.
If you enjoy the show and you want to get more of our content, head on over to patreon.com/Journey Through Sci-Fi, where we have hours upon hours of bonus episodes. You can go back and listen to us reviewing Possessor after it came out during the heady days of the COVID-19 pandemic, watching one of the most depressing movies ever made. If that sounds fun, you can go and find that in the Patreon archive.
There's more fun stuff than that, trust us.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, we will leave you for now, and we'll be back very soon with our episode on Del Toro's Frankenstein and The Bride from Maggie Gyllenhaal.
Thank you very much for listening. That's all.
Bye.